journey always begins with the call. One way or another, a guide must come to say, look, you're in sleepy land. Wake up. Come on a trip. There is a whole aspect of your consciousness, of your being, that's not been touched. So you think you're at home here? Well, there's not enough of you out there. And so it starts. The great mythologist and teacher of comparative religion, Joseph Campbell, was the one who opened my eyes to the great truths to be found in myth, legend, fairy tale, and on a much more personal creative level, in dreams. Sure, I'd always known that there were morals and small truths hidden in the stories, but he gave me permission to dig deeper into the metaphors for even more meaning and to take these stories seriously. Seriously enough to apply the lessons to my own life. Seriously enough to heal my own battered psyche. One mistake that I had always made was to think that a myth was not real and therefore was not true. Myths are most assuredly true, but not in that journalistic presentation of history sense that we meet every day. Myths and dreams are creatures of the subconscious, of the psyche, of the emotions, and they represent truth that cannot be fully articulated in words. Campbell describes mythology as the penultimate truth because it transcends verbal expression. This morning, I will present a few myths out of the many that have spoken to me through the years. These stories often have many, many versions, and of course, I have chosen the ones that speak most deeply to me. It may be that your interpretation of the myth may differ from mine in markedly different ways. And that's totally fine. You have your psyche, and I have mine. And we're both okay for the way we are. For instance, one of the myth interpretations where we could differ is the Persephone story. This story is familiar to almost everyone, and that is why I chose it for my first tale. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, who was the goddess of agriculture, and of Zeus, the king of the gods. Now, let me note here at the outset that every character in this story is an archetype. An archetype is an idea, symbol, pattern, or character type in a story, and it's any story element that appears again and again and again in stories from cultures from all over the world. They symbolize something universal in the human experience. In the story of Persephone, Demeter, her mother, is an archetype of the good mother. She tends selflessly for her child and for all the humans under her care, providing them with fruits, grains, and all flowering abundance. Persephone's father, Zeus, is not a father archetype. No. Zeus is the king archetype, and as such is rarely, if ever, around, instead spending his time on Mount Olympus telling everyone else how to live, making rules for everybody to obey, and meting out his form of justice when his rules are broken. Persephone is the maiden archetype, her beauty budding, but she's not quite old enough to leave her mother yet. And Hades, well, he's the lord of the underworld. He's dark and largely unknowable. You really have to dig to know him. As one version of the story goes, Persephone was happily picking flowers in a meadow when Hades, who had been coveting her from his underworld home, opened up the ground beneath her feet and abducted her away. Demeter, hearing her daughter cry out, rushed to save her child and found only an empty meadow. Distraught, Demeter began frantically searching everywhere all over the world for her daughter. But now, wherever her footsteps touched the earth, instead of green abundance, barrenness and frost followed. This went on until the earth was slipping dangerously into famine. And finally, Zeus could no longer ignore the situation. He ordered Hades to return Persephone to her mother. Now, the ancient Greeks believed that if you ate anything while you were in the underworld, you were bound to the underworld forever. And Persephone knew this. The whole time she was Hades' captive, she refused to eat anything, even the smallest morsel, and she only drank the juice of a pomegranate. In other words, she refused to give herself wholly to Hades and the underworld. Her hope remained free. Unfortunately, she had accidentally swallowed one pomegranate seed and therefore was bound to the underworld for at least a portion of the year. When she is above ground with her mother, the fertile earth abounds in green growing things. But when she has to return to Hades, her mother's grief causes the earth to lie barren underneath the blanket of winter. Some people nowadays would like to reshape the story of Persephone so that the maiden decides on her own to enter the underworld in order to free the souls held captive there. This puts her in full control of her own body and soul. Now, I'm as feminist as anyone, I promise, and I am much in favor of strong female models. But I think to rewrite the myth in this way is to do a disservice to all young girls, and there are so many of them, who have been snatched from their childhood by being sold or given away as child brides, or who've been snatched from a park by a complete stranger, or most horribly, have been snatched away by their very own fathers, and that happens far more frequently than I ever dreamed possible. The strength of the original Persephone is to refrain from eating while in the underworld, no matter how relief-giving in the moment that morsel may be. To resist being bound psychically to this underworld, to retain a sliver of her own self so that she may someday walk the earth as her own person. I think we owe all of these young, unwilling Persephones an archetype of hope and strength of their very own. And this is why I keep the earlier versions of the Persephone story in the library of my mind. Artemis and Actaeon. Once upon a time, back when the gods of Mount Olympus ruled over Greece, there lived a handsome youth named Actaeon. Now, Actaeon had been sent away to study under the mentorship of the great centaur Chiron, and it was under this tutelage that Actaeon had become a very skilled hunter, rivaling the best hunters in all of the land. He owned a pack of extremely loyal hunting dogs who would obey perfectly and immediately his every command. Perhaps because of Actaeon's vigor and ambition, or perhaps because he attained his hunting skills so easily and at such a young age, or maybe even perhaps because the fires of youth clouded his eyes to his own mortality. For whatever reason, Actaeon turned toward hubris. He tended toward hubris. And this hubris became his fatal flaw. One early morning, Actaeon and his companions set out hunting stag, but by noontime had not happened upon a single one of them. When they found a shady brook, his companions insisted that they stop for a while to rest, to eat, and to refresh themselves. Actaeon, however, noted that they were at that point in the forest that separated the woods where men roamed from the wild or untamed parts that were reserved for the gods alone. Feeling that the stag had probably found refuge in the wildwood, Actaeon told his friends that he would take his dogs and enter the forest alone. He would return to them after the kill. Deeper, deeper into the forest Actaeon ventured, but still no stag. Suddenly, he stopped and stared in amazement, for down a hill below him, in her secluded sacred pool, was the great goddess Artemis, bathing with her nymphs and some of the animals that were sacred to her. Now, Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and childbirth. And she is known as a fierce protector of nature and of young women. She is a virgin goddess, which means that she derives her power from herself alone. She is beholden to no other entity for this power. She guards her domain and her privacy, and she has her own set of rules which must be followed without question. And one of those rules is that no mortal may gaze upon Artemis while she is in her sacred pool. Could Actaeon have backed away from his vantage point in the bushes and avoided detection by Artemis? Who can say? He had come upon her by accident, after all, but Actaeon did not quietly back away. Instead, he stood there mesmerized by her beauty. And some versions of this tale imply that his desire for her was on obvious display, if you know. Artemis's reaction to this invasion of her privacy was swift and merciless. In a twinkling, she transformed Actaeon from a mortal youth into a sleek stag, which startled Actaeon so much that he turned and began to run away. Unfortunately, his loyal hounds could no longer recognize their master in his transformed state, and they immediately fell on him, tearing him to pieces. The punishment of Actaeon is harsh and immediate, and made seemingly more so by the norms of our modern civilization, by the norms that our modern civilization pretends to live by. The hunter is destroyed by the very vehicles he once used to destroy other life. Gender roles are reversed to the point that no definitely means no. Trespassing across others' boundaries is expressly forbidden. But to me, The loudest cautionary note in this myth lies here. Artemis, after all is said and done, is a nature goddess. To her belong all the rules of nature. To her belong all the laws of physics. Mankind is told these laws, and we often know what will happen if we disobey a law of physics. Artemis says, "Do not walk off that cliff. You will plummet to the canyon floor below, and you will surely die. But you walk off the cliff. It does not matter if you walked off the cliff on purpose, or whether you accidentally stepped off while admiring one of Artemis's own natural works of wonder in the far distance. Your body will obey the laws of physics, and you will accelerate at 32 feet per second until you finally hit the ground." Artemis does not suspend a law of nature, a law of physics, for any being or anything. Excuse me. We moderns know full well the probable outcome of continued climate change, but our hubris blinds us to think that we can break the laws of nature anyway, and that the great goddess will merely shrug, say, "Oh, how cute is that?" and look the other way. This myth tells us otherwise.
Thank you for your gifts.
It's kind of hard to keep up with it. This is a different morning, isn't it? And I want to thank Aaron for jumping in. He's not only head of the AV today, but he's also jumping up because our Yesenia is still not quite able to play with the broken wrist. So, and thank you too for the story for all ages. I'm having fun. Our final story is Garuda and the Tiny Bird. I have long admired Hindu myths for their depth and wisdom. These tales are old, and I intuit that there's so much meaning hidden in these stories that if I could go back and start all over again, I would study these tales and try to uncover the truths hidden inside. As it is, the sheer number of divine Hindu beings renders it impossible for this octogenarian to even begin to scratch the surface. These tales can be vast in scope. Some imply universes beyond universes existing concurrently. Others seem to say that the concept of an ever-expanding universe is incorrect, that we come into existence via a Big Bang type of event, expand, and then implode upon ourselves only to be reborn in another Big Bang. So it goes. These events take place over vast amounts of time called yugas. And we are presently in our universe's fourth and final yuga, the Kali Yuga. So, even the Hindus hint that we are in the end times. But don't despair. You still have over 426,000 years left to go in this particular Kali Yuga. But I say, be on the safe side and live righteously anyway. Hindu tales exist from the vast to the minute, and I'd like to bring our attention away from the multiverse down to a more personal level, down to a size that we can actually do something with. I invite you to shift your attention from the vast universe to a tiny bird. Since this is a Hindu tale, a little preparation can greatly enhance the telling of it, so allow me to introduce the cast of characters. Garuda. Garuda is a divine being, half man, half eagle, whose superpower is that he can travel halfway around the world in a blink of the eye. Because of this power, he is generally depicted as the vehicle of Vishnu. Vishnu is one of the principal deities of Hinduism, known as the one who pervades and sustains the universe. Along with Brahma and Shiva, Vishnu comprises kind of a holy trinity of Hinduism. And here is Vishnu riding on his Garuda. Shiva. I think that most of you will recognize Shiva in this statuary depiction over on the left as the Lord of the cosmic dance. In one of his hands, he holds a tiny drum, the sound of which is creation itself, and whose constant sounding is the continual transformation of the universe. Tick-a-tick-a-tick-a-tick-a-tick. Shiva's dance is the transformation of all creation through time. And then here's another depiction of Shiva on the right that I just love because of the exuberance of his cosmic dance. And so, two views of Shiva there. Yama. Yama is the god of death and justice, known as the ruler of the underworld. He is responsible for judging the souls of the deceased and determining their fate based on their deeds in life. So, with all of our introductions complete, Garuda and the tiny bird. One day, Vishnu, riding Garuda, went to visit Lord Shiva at his home on Mount Kailash. At the entrance gate, God Vishnu left behind his Garuda and entered the grounds alone. Garuda was left to contemplate the exquisite natural beauty of the place, and was quite awestruck by what he was experiencing. All of a sudden, a beautiful little bird lit atop the archway entrance to Lord Shiva's home and began to sing the most beautiful song that Garuda had ever heard. Garuda wondered aloud, "How marvelous is this creation! The one who has created these lofty mountains in the background has also made this beautiful little bird." And they both seem equally wonderful. At that very moment, he saw Yama, the god of death, riding on his buffalo, passing by with the intention of meeting with Lord Shiva. As he crossed the arch, Yama's eyes went over to the bird, and he raised his brows in a very puzzled expression. Then he took his eyes off the bird and disappeared inside. Since even a slight glance by Yama is believed to be the harbinger of the death of that living being, Garuda, who had observed Yama's action, told himself, "Yama looking intently at the bird can only mean one thing. The bird is going to die." Perhaps on his way out of Lord Shiva's home, Yama will carry away the bird's soul with him. Garuda's heart was filled with pity for the helpless creature. That the tiny bird was oblivious to its own impending doom further agonized Garuda, and he resolved to save it from the clutches of death. He swooped the bird up in his mighty talons and rushed to a forest thousands of miles away, where he left the little creature safe on a rock beside a laughing brook. Then he returned to Kailash and regained his position at the entrance gate. Soon after, Yama emerged from inside and nodded to Garuda in recognition. Garuda greeted the god of death and said, "Might I ask you a question?" "Yes, you can satisfy your curiosity," replied the Yama. "While going inside, you saw a beautiful bird here, and for a moment you became very pensive. Can you tell me why?" Yama smiled and then answered him, "Well, when my eyes fell on the little bird, I saw that it was to die in a very few minutes, swallowed by a python far away from here in a forest near a brook. I wondered at the time how this tiny creature could possibly traverse the thousands of miles separating it from its destiny in such a short time. But then I entered Lord Shiva's grounds and I forgot about it. Surely it must have happened somehow." Saying this, the Yama smiled at Garuda and rode away. Garuda sat perplexed, mulling over the surprising events that had taken place. He and we are left to ponder several questions. Did Yama know about Garuda's specific role in the matter? The story does not tell us for sure. Would the bird have lived had Garuda not intervened? the story does not, another unanswered question. And what about karma? Did Garuda accrue negative karma by directly contributing to the death of the bird? Or did he accrue positive karma for attempting to save its life? The Hindu who told this tale to me said that if one's intentions, your intentions are good, no negative karma is accrued, even if the final results do not turn out exactly the way you planned. This apportionment of karma is unanswerable by we humans because we can assess guilt or innocence of another only through our own senses and intuitions. The missing ingredient is knowing the intention of the person we are attempting to judge. But we, who cannot see into the souls of others, cannot make that final judgment because we are lacking that one vital piece of information, which is intention. Only the Yama can do that. Okay. Let's.
Meanwhile, the